Is this really the next tooling that we're going to use for our next wave of DevOps journey? This is what we're going to look at today, and I'm really glad to have Paul on the call today, which is going to walk us through what Systeminit actually is, how it empowers developers, and especially how this is going to look like from a CI/CD perspective. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm delighted to be on.
And I'm glad that you're one of the first people that gets into my show to talk about something that is not yet ready for prime time, but is potentially going to be ready for prime time in a few years. So what the hell are we going to talk about, Paul? Can you give us like a 20 seconds intro?
Perfect. So Systeminitiative is a new multiplayer real-time DevOps tool that has been designed with digital twins in mind to make it safe to change and modify infrastructure. There's a lot of buzzwords I've just said there, but basically we've taken a step back, rethought what the last 15 years of DevOps and infrastructure as code has given us, and looked at it with a fresh set of eyes in order to try and come up with better ways for collaboration, working together, all of the things that people actually need to be able to be successful with their role.
Okay, but DevOps isn't it just tools? What is DevOps for you?
So, this is a question that could have like such a long answer. So, like DevOps, yes. So in its inception, DevOps was communication. DevOps was people working together, right? But we've somehow drifted away from that, and it's become about the tools. Mm-hmm. But the tools have actually made it more difficult for people to work together. Okay, so for example, you have areas of specialization in DSLs or programming languages or, workflows or networking. And it's really difficult to bring all these things together for people to actually be successful within their role. Because ultimately, it's not about our success. It's the success of the organization that you're in. Okay. And if you can do something that brings all of those people together to be successful within the organization, then it's a real winning formula for what's going on. So rather than stitching 10, 15, 20 tools together, we're trying to look at it with a different way of going into, maybe you could think of it a little like platformy, but it's not platformy at the same time. It's like a little on a different level from that.
Yeah, and I think that the CNCF landscapes especially shows a lot of tools, like over 200, I believe, that they have today. And that is also a complex way of taking decisions on where you want to go. So, I really think that these different possibilities of using different tools doesn't make it easier for developers or for DevOps practitioners, I would say, right? And so I'm really looking forward to see your answer. But does that mean that you're going to sell us a new tool now that we're going to be paying for?
So Systeminitiative, everything I'm going to show you today is Apache 2 licensed. It's open source. It's free. You can go to github.com/systeminit/SI. You can download the repo. There is a Nix file so that you can just run a single command, which brings the entire environment up. You can package the software yourself. You can actually run it yourself. Everything is there, and all of the terms and conditions about using that as open source software are available on the website. So it is, technically speaking, it is free for you to use if you really want to.
Cool. That sounds better than another tool to those 200 that we have.
Yeah.
That means you're also building a community around that, I guess.
Yes, and that's the important thing, right? Of course, there will be commercial software that'll come off the back of it, but the most important thing is about fostering the community, helping that next wave of DevOps, people working together to be able to go and enable new tools, new facilitation of ideas, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to get that. We term it internally as the second wave of DevOps, and that's exactly what we're positioning it as. We're really trying to reignite the ecosystem again to be able to get a lot more new ideas, new flows, new philosophies going, so that we can actually get back to having a lot of fun and building new stuff.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And actually, I think your career background also shows the possibility to get those tools together. If I recall correctly, you've been part of HashiCorp, part of Pulumi, doing some Terraform stuff, doing some infrastructure as code stuff. What did bring you to create Systeminit with the team?
So, yeah, that's exactly my background. I was a developer, moved into infrastructure, was an infrastructure engineer, building infrastructure, got really painful, using Puppet. Then I found Terraform back in I want to say maybe 2009, and started building. I actually ended up joining HashiCorp because of how much I did in the Terraform ecosystem. Stayed there for a few years. then went to join BMC, then went to join Joyent, which became Samsung, started working stuff there, then ended up leaving there, went to Pulumi. I'm always like looking on the cutting edge of like how things are changing. And like it got to the point when I left Pulumi, I was like, I don't really know where I want to go yet or what I want to do. And got introduced to Systeminitiative, and I was like, this is like going to blow people's minds. And I was like, I want to be part of like blowing that, you know, really like changing the ecosystem and how people actually use tools. So it felt to me like my personal journey in the infrastructure as code space had come to an end, because it was the same tools, in my opinion, just in a different representation, doing a similar thing, having the same arguments of whether it's declarative or imperative or whether it, you know, and it just got tiresome. So it was like, right, time to have fresh eyes, have a new look at a new part of the ecosystem. Let's see what we can actually go and do.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. And that means that you're now part of the product team building stuff there, or are you part of the sales organization in Systeminitiative, just for context of people? So how technically will we be in the next few minutes?
So Systeminitiative is a tiny team. The entire company is 16 people. So everybody does everything at this moment in time. I just, like in the last 3 months, actually changed from being one of the engineers to leading the product. So I'm actually the product manager now, because I'm so heavily invested in the product, and I have like the background of the ecosystems that I can understand what's going on, but I still write code on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, like, and everything I'll show you that when we dig into the code itself, you'll see that I'm one of the people that's writing that.
Cool. Then let's start doing that. And my channel, I think I told you, I have an audience with a lot of detailed technical people. So let's dive as technical, as detailed as possible, right? And let's go into details. How does this look? How do I use it? And let's go through a little bit of a demo, maybe for the next like 10 minutes or something like that. And then I would like to really look at how does this then put things in context with the new way of doing CI/CD, right? Yeah. Because that's what my interest mainly is personally. Yeah. So let's get going.
Okay. So I'm just going to share my screen. And so this is Systeminitiative. Okay. Systeminitiative, people look at it straight away and they're like, oh my God, it's drag and drop. It's not just drag and drop. It's a power tool that allows you to be able to facilitate conversations. So like, for example, if I show you right now, you can see the change set that I'm on is head. Head is what we call what is in the real world. So Systeminitiative is a digital twin. We have a local representation, a digital representation of your infrastructure, and then we have the representation that is in the real world, and we have data that transfers between them to actually make that system happen. Okay, it's not desired state, so you don't drag it on and say, I want 4 instances running, or I want this ECS cluster serving traffic. What you actually do is you drag the assets to the canvas and you apply behavior to those assets to be able to get your environment to the state that it's currently in. So at any point, I can change set, which creates a new simulation, which is actually not applied to the real world until I am happy and click the apply change set button. So you can do changes of your infrastructure and the understanding what the implications will be very easily without actually doing anything. So I have a local stack environment running right now so that we can actually get it up and running. So like the first thing I can do is I can drag an AWS credential onto my canvas. And so
maybe one thing, like we're starting from zero now. Is there already a chance to import existing resources or things like that?
So we don't have that at this moment, and you'll see the reason why we don't have that. But that is something that we are thinking heavily about because of the idea of the way that our functions actually run.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm asking that.
In June 2024, it's kind of for greenfield only.
Okay.
But there is bigger plans that's going to happen in that case.
Okay. And that would then mean somehow import existing infrastructure as code and or deployed resources to then apply change sets and patterns on top of that, because that would be essentially, otherwise you're limited to greenfield architecture.
100% you're correct. Yes, 100% you are correct. And like the interesting thing here about Systeminitiative, about us as Systeminitiative, is that we haven't built our own layers of abstraction across the cloud. Okay, so in infrastructure as code today, you have what's called the 200% problem. You have to learn the tool, plus you have to learn the cloud and all of the APIs, and you have to sort of bring these things together. We've actually built a one-to-one mapping of what the cloud is within our resources, and I'll show you that as we go through. Okay, so let's create secrets, and my secret is local stack, and it's a very secure key.
So this runs as a desktop app on your side now, and this
is actually running. So I have everything spun up locally, but most of the work here is all happening in the browser, and there is like a couple of services in the background that, like the web server in the browser, is actually talking to.
Okay, but how, if I would now want to try this out, I would go to the open source repository, would download the latest version, and then there is a shell script or whatever that I can.
Yes, it just spins it up. Yes, yeah. So it spins up 4 services, 5 services. Like in AWS, if you're off your local machine, how we've actually done it is we're using Firecracker VMs so that each function that runs actually spins up its own little firecracker and is isolated and secure from each other and then destroys itself. But locally, it's just the same runner because it's just a local instance. Okay, cool. So first thing that we've actually done here is it's because I have added some credentials, it's checked that those credentials are valid, and it's like immediately run a qualification to check that everything is working as expected, right? So the whole thing about Systeminitiative is as you're doing things, it's making live checks against the infrastructure that you actually needed to do so. So now that we have a credential, let's bring in a region. And you can see, like, I'm in dev mode locally, so you can see that there's a tiny, faint little purple line here. And what that actually shows is that this region is connected to this credential. Okay, so it's building a hierarchy just by drawing within the bounds of the model itself. Okay, so let's change the region. Let's make the region to be Ireland, just because it's the closest one to me at this moment in time. And what it's actually going to do is when it runs the model, it actually runs qualifications to check that the region is available and that it's the correct region for your AWS account. So from that, I can actually bring in a VPC, and I can bring in a subnet. Actually, let's bring in 2 subnets just because they're nice and easy, and I can connect this 2 subnets to the VPC, and my VPC can actually be 10.0.
You haven't specified which region this is at the end, right? So
so the top level is actually specified to be EU West 1. Okay, so what actually happens is that that's going to make its way down into all of the...
Of course. Yeah, that's what I guess. That's why I was asking.
Yeah. So it's like, it builds this chain, this flow, it's hypergraph, and it's sort of be able to do things and push them together. And then, like, based on that, I can say my availability zone will be EU West 1A. Let's go for 10.0.0.0/20. Let's make it a public subnet. And then let's make this one 10.0.0/40. Let's also make this one a public subnet. And then EU West 1B. And like very quickly, you're able to start to like verify what's happening. So I told you that this was in a change set, okay? So the current state of the world is this at this moment in time. There is no infrastructure in the real world, okay? In the real world. So again, I'm going back into my change set. Once I'm happy that that's actually the case, I'm going to apply that. Like I know that the actions are going to run VPC and then the subnets. Let's apply those, and you can actually see what's going to happen here. So we get a full like create loop that's happening. And of course, other people can be building in other change sets at the same time on the same diagram, and the resources will just be running and just happening in the background. We can see the history of the API request that's gone. So we can see here are all the arguments that has been generated by Systeminitiative that pushes it out. So this is the CIDR block, the AWS resource type for the tags. We can see the actual code. It's self-executing. I'm going to show you this code, and I'm going to talk to you about this code in a second, because this is the important part about Systeminitiative. Okay, we can see the result that comes back, and we can actually see the logs that comes back from AWS. Now you can see that one of my subnets actually failed, and if we go and have a look in the history of why it failed, we can have a look in the logs and we can say, oh, look, 10.0.0.0/40 for a parameter CIDR block is not valid. So, we're very quickly able to get changes of what's going on. So what we can do is we can open a change set here. We can actually go and we can play around with this, and we can actually say, instead of that, let's make it 20. Let's re-queue that action for that create. Mm-hmm. And once the model has validated that it should be better now, it will actually go. We can apply that into the real world again. Again, it's failed because I know again that that's not the right CIDR block type. So you're very quickly able to get changes for what's going wrong. You're able to understand what the AWS CLI is telling us. So let's say that everything that's here is an asset. An asset has a schema, and that schema has functions attached to it. Okay. Now those functions are behavioral functions for things like create, delete, refresh, updates, all of these different things. But I told you earlier on that Systeminitiative is not just desired state. You apply behavior. That's what these function runs are. These are behavior. They're taking this data and they're applying this function to be able to take it into the real world. Mm-hmm. Everything here is full fidelity. Okay. Now, what I mean by that is the code is not hidden in a black box. You can't extend it yourself. You can very quickly get into this customize tab. Okay. We're going to open a change set. And inside the customize tab, here's the schema that is generated to be able to do this. Okay. Now, this schema is actually generated using github.com/Systeminitiative. SI, and there's a little app inside the bin folder, and it's called the SI generator. And the SI generator allows us to be able to use any API request within the S3, within the AWS API to generate the schema, generate the create call, generate the refresh call, generate the delete call. Okay, so all of these pieces of code in here have actually been able to do that. And I can show you what I mean by that, right? So I'm going to create an EKS cluster, and I just want to show you just how simple it is to create a new asset.
Hopefully just locally, otherwise we're going to wait 20 minutes.
Yes. Absolutely. So I ran a command on my machine, okay, which generated this schema. So an EKS cluster has a name, it has a version, it has a role ARN, it has the resource VPC config, it has the security groups, the subnets.
Let me just ask you something quickly. This is AWS only right now, as it
is. Yeah, it's open for any cloud. It doesn't matter. The ones that we've concentrated today is AWS, just because
that makes sense.
The ones that we actually started with.
But essentially, that means that the asset types that we're selecting on the left-hand side at the moment, and that we then start to edit, they are AWS-specific versions of assets types.
Okay. Correct. Exactly correct.
How are you going to address, or do you have an idea on how you're going to address the multi-cloud story with this going forward?
Yeah, so it's a wonderful question. Okay, so we're in a little bit of a nice situation here. Okay, the nice situation is that we're a one-to-one mapping against the cloud. Okay, because we're a one-to-one mapping against the cloud, we can take advantage of LLMs to be able to generate the schema for what's going on. Okay, this was our first foray into automatically generating a schema for the cloud itself. Okay, now what we actually use is if I go into the VPC and I have a look at the create action, we actually use the AWS CLI. You can see it's an exec against AWS EC2 create VPC, passing in all of the code. Okay, we're not reinventing a different API level. We're not talking to Terraform or Pulumi or anything. We're talking directly to AWS with exactly the structure that AWS requires us to go to. And because of that, we're able to auto-generate the schemas, the create actions, the delete actions, and the refresh actions for all of the AWS surface area if we really want to.
That makes sense.
And the command I actually ran to create that cluster asset is that SI generate the asset for EKS as the service and the create cluster method.
Okay, got it.
Okay, I can do the exact same thing to be able to call for the create functionality. And the create functionality would be that call. So generate the create API call for the EKS create cluster method. And then we could do the same for refresh, and we can do the same for delete. So it's like a little, I'm not going to say it's easier. It's definitely not easier. It just means that we're in a situation where we have a schema that we can work towards, and we don't have to create our own level of abstraction.
Okay, but that actually means that all of that stuff on the Systeminitiative side is auto-generated from the SDKs that AWS provides, and that also gives us no delay to get access to new features.
Exactly, right? Okay. And this is the beautiful thing about full fidelity, right? And that's not to say that other vendors are wrong. Absolutely not, okay? But if AWS release a feature at 10:30 a.m. today on Thursday for subnet, I can say new prop, I can give it the name. So let's call it demo, okay? I can add that prop in here. I can go to my code gen. Mm-hmm. I can say demo, which is input.domain.demo.
Okay.
I can regenerate the asset. And on the screen, you'll see that there's 2 lightning bolts have appeared on this subnet. Now, these do not have the demo prop at this moment in time. If I click this button, it'll upgrade them, and now that is available to be able to use in your API calls. Cool. So you don't need to wait for it. And I'm doing this in the context of a change set, so I can even test if a new AWS feature is available and useful for me to use without even applying it to like the real world, without applying it for everybody in the ecosystem to use within my ecosystem. So it gives us that little bit more flexibility. And you can see this one I haven't upgraded yet, so it doesn't have the demo. So you can actually be running in mix and matched mode.
Okay.
Entirely your choice.
Okay, got it.
So that full fidelity is really important. But the last piece for us, which is a piece that we care greatly about, is to do with the ability to like create functions like simple. Okay,
so to get back to the multi-cloud question, that means that we don't yet have a multi-cloud story itself. We need to make that available somehow, right? Because where I'm coming from is like, if I want to build multi-cloud applications, which I'm seeing more and more coming out, right?
Yeah.
There might need to be an abstraction layer between the actual cloud implementation and then what it actually is.
So,
right.
I played with this just last week, just a couple of weeks ago, where I wanted to try something on Scaleway. Okay, Scaleway is like a smaller cloud in Europe that I love for doing a lot of like small pieces.
Okay.
So I wrote the functions required to be able to create a project in Scaleway. So there's a couple of props, there's a refresh function, there's a delete action, there's a create function, there's like the actual credential itself that goes with it. I just plug this in and I could actually interact with Scaleway within the same workspace that I was doing in AWS.
Makes sense.
So you can have your own implementation for your own environment, whatever. If there's an API that it can talk to, Systeminitiative can actually drive it for you.
Cool. Thanks for the
clarification. And then this last part, right, is like, here's like some of the main things. Like we want to be this power tool. Okay. Now, assume role policy documents are just an absolute pain to remember the syntax for. But I know that I want to create an assume role policy for EC2. So if I actually generate the policy for the service, what Systeminitiative will do is it'll go and it'll actually run a dynamic function that can be attached to that. And it will pop open and it actually allows you to be able to generate. So you can create your own snippets. You can create your own like pieces of the puzzle in order to do it. Now, an interesting experiment that we're actually running at this moment in time is we're trying to recreate how IAM works within Systeminitiative to make it more composed together. And my boss actually started creating a lot of IAM configurations that work together. And like you can compose it down into statements, conditions, and IAM principles and different pieces. And if we actually go back, you can actually see now we have a whole segment called IAM Revisited. Okay. And as part of IAM Revisited, you can have a policy statement. You can actually have a principle. that principal can connect in as a principal. You can actually have a user, you can have another service principal that will actually interact with it as part of it. And as part of the code and the policy documents, it will auto-generate all of the correct conditions and all of the different pieces that's going to happen. Cool. So, there's a lot of cool things we're actually able to test and play around with in here because it is that one-to-one model of what's happening in the cloud.
Cool. Okay, so we wanted to talk a bit about functions, and we are already at over 20 minutes. Okay. So let's have a look on functions and how do we apply them to the different assets. And,
so great.
Then we shift pace a little bit towards the CI/CD aspect of this.
Absolutely. So I told you that it's all about applying behavior to cloud. Okay, so for example, like an EC2 instance with traditional infrastructure as code tools, you would just basically say that you want this running or you want this stopped or you want that but with here in Systeminitiative, you can actually go and you can have functions where you would reboot it. So you can stop it. And what actually happens is it creates it because it knows that there's actually an order of hierarchy here where it would basically say, look, create this, then it would run this next function, which in our case would actually be, I can't see which one this is at this moment. There's a naming collision there, but it would either be stop or reboot. And then even from that, we have an ECS. I want to say it's in the service. Yeah, and we can update task definitions, you can update desired counts. So it's kind of, if you think of it like an actor model where you have data and you apply behavior to that data to be able to make it do something. Okay. And again, it's built in exactly the same way, right? So there's an EC2 instance, and as part of the EC2 instance, you just have to go in and implement the API call. Look, in this case, it's just reboot instances. And it's not stateful because it's talking to the cloud. It has the ARN. It understands what ARN that's the only piece of information we care about, the only piece that we actually carry. Everything else does live lookups to AWS to get that data and bring it back. So there's I could go way more into the fact that it's a hypergraph and the fact that we'll do one more thing, okay? If I change this top level credential, okay, and I add a secret and I call it local stack 2 and it's test and it's test and it's test. So because it understands that this is the top of the world, what Systeminitiative will actually do is it'll recalculate everything downstream of that change, and it will understand all of the effects of what's happening, and you can actually see it rolling through. So it's done the region, it's done the local stack, it's now doing the region, and then it'll go through the individual applications itself, and it'll actually tell you there and then if there are any failures. And we can see easily on that left-hand side that the qualification for this has failed because the availability zone is wrong. Qualification for this one is IAM role doesn't have a name. So we're getting that live.
So essentially that also means that now on the top level, I could now change, you just changed the permissions, but I could potentially also just change the region.
Absolutely. And it'll tell me they don't exist in the other region, and it would tell me it would have to create them again. Yes.
And that also means that I could now apply resource tags or something like that in a similar way, I would guess. Yes,
exactly right. And more importantly, I can copy the entire set of infrastructure. Let's say we want to create an entire set of infrastructure and a new account, a new AWS account environment. I just Control V, and it'll actually create a new copy, and it'll actually work out what it actually has to do to make that new copy go into the real world as well.
That is cool.
And you can see it's very Figma Miro-esque, where you have a large workspace and you can zoom in different pieces and out, and you can actually select on the diagram where things are. So we're trying to envisage this as a collaborative tool that people can work together. And if there was another person on my desktop, you would actually see the other person's cursor zooming around here doing exactly the same thing.
That is cool. I would say the UI might need some love, right? To make it a little bit more modern, but I think that's something that you're gonna get to when you're ready to that. Now, going back to that question around changing region and these kind of things, I would just, if I do that changes my target, but just for this change set, right? So this means
just for this change set, absolutely, because head still has what is in the real world. And in that change set, that the proposed changes that you want to see. So let's say you have a security review by, one of your teams where you've implemented a new piece of software, or a new piece of like infrastructure or some changes. You can leave this change set open. You can invite them into this change set so they can live review it with you to see the ramifications of what you want to do. And then you can apply that together to be able to see and make sure that it actually would work for you within your organization.
Okay, so CI/CD becomes applying a change to a target environment.
Yes. No.
At the end.
Yes. No. There's a lot of things that we want to do with CI/CD. Like we would love this to be driven by via an API, so that people can actually trigger it based on changes from other pieces of system. Like let's say you have like your software, like your actual code itself that changes and creates a new deployment artifact. We want then that artifact or your CI/CD pipeline itself would be able to trigger that apply from that generate artifact into your environment using Systeminitiative. But we're not quite there on the API yet. So for us, everything at this moment in time for CI/CD is this apply of change set. It's like actually like testing it, rolling through, and the fact that you actually get like write tests against the function. So I can actually test the function on the graph. I can see like what pieces of information it will do, what API call it's going to be able to give me. So it's sort of everything encompassing in one at this moment in time.
Okay, makes sense. So what's the current approach? No, it's fine.
Okay.
You can well my next question is kind of what's the current view of bringing something like this to a live environment? I'm not sure if enterprises will want to look at the tool, apply the change set, then it gets out and gets deployed. What's your take on how we're going to take this concept and back this into traditional CI/CD and or GitOps ways?
So it's a great question. I'm going to show you we use Systeminitiative to deploy our version of Systeminitiative online. Okay. And we did this in a multi-user way. Okay. We did this with our ops team working together, like our software team working. And this was all built in the collaborative manner. Let me change the theme here. Sorry. And you can like see that here are all our security groups and all of the pieces that are there. There's all of our SSM passwords, our key pairs. Like this is how we actually deploy launch templates for like the pieces. This is another version of the application that goes with it. There is our load balancer. That's our route tables, and everything for the route table sits in that subnet. And then we have we deploy Tailscale into our environment. So for us, it's about like coming together piece by piece by piece in order to build an infrastructure in a collaborative manner. And we've actually user tested this the entire way through its development. So this hasn't been us as a team off in a black box, just hoping that this is what people are going to use. We've actually tested each piece of this and found out what features would be more useful for the more enterprise teams. Now, collaboration is definitely one of the hot pieces that was there. But the fact that what this did is this lowered the barrier to entry for the infrastructure, because people didn't need to go and look at a DSL or code to be able to understand what's in your infrastructure. They could go very quickly and look at a visual representation to be able to decompose it. So it became the medium for discussion, for communication about building this infrastructure, rather than needing people to go off and do it themselves.
Okay. So that means the collaborative approach of collaborating together on the type of infrastructure that you need to bring up your own installation at the end.
Exactly. And I don't know if you saw, but there was a little icon just appeared here. One of the other people just appeared in this workspace. I'm sad they disappeared, because you could actually be able to see where they were in the workspace. You can click to go and follow them. You can we're kind of hoping that this is going to be the tool where teams, rather than together on Zoom and one drives code and the other people just watch and talk, this is actually people dragging and dropping and changing things at exactly the same time. In order to how we would do it on a whiteboard together.
Okay, I get that. So this is, at the moment, we're looking at a lot of infrastructure at the end. How does the application details come into play here. So at the end, if I have a proprietary piece of software that I want to deploy into this, I might also need a continuous integration process that comes before I actually do the continuous deployment part. So what's your take on how this will look like, or how does it look today?
There's a number of services. There's the web UI, okay, which is the most simple view app that you can imagine. And that view app talks back to a service called SDF, okay, which is a web server written in Rust. Okay, so it's a small Rust binary. There is a service called the rebaser. That rebaser basically understands the order in which events happen and makes sure those events get replayed in exactly the same way. There is a service called Veritech, and this Veritech instance is what spins up the Firecracker VMs, and it makes sure that the VMs are all isolated away from each other so that functions, like, you don't have noisy neighbors, you can't have people sniffing like secrets or stuff like that. And then lastly, you have a piece of infrastructure called Pinga, and Pinga is just basically like a job controller to make sure that when a function has been dispatched, that this comes back. It uses NATs and it uses a database, right? So it's a pretty simple application layout. And you can see we actually have even got this running at ECS. So you have web, we have our OTel collectors, we have PGLIs running as ECS tasks. It's actually pretty simple layout. Like what we've actually done here is like try to scale this in a huge way so that we can use Systeminitiative, like to be able to deploy hundreds of thousands of functions at the same time. Of course, that's not going to be the case for a lot of developers in their own environment. So you can start very simple, and even within our repo.
Yeah, you still didn't get to the need of application code getting into this. So we're still talking about the infrastructure to provision the application code.
So the actual application code itself is all Rust and Vue for the front end.
That makes sense. My question is more from a developer's perspective. Now, you're one of the developer building that Vue app. You're updating it and implementing a new feature. How would I get that into Systeminit at the end? Because
into a live deployed version?
Yes, exactly.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Completely my mistake on the question itself. Yeah, we use BuildKite to be able to do that. So everything that we do, we have like our pipelines to be able to do it. We have our merge queue, we have our merge into main. Once our merge,
see that here. How do I see that here? So is there a way to see that today? Because let's say we have infrastructure as code. This is what Systeminit gives me so far. Here's what I understood. This is a new way of writing infrastructure as code that allows me to graphically design infrastructure as code and then provision that to a cloud environment. Now, that's the simple part, I would say. But then there is the way where engineers or real developers kind of contribute UI pieces or backend pieces or stuff like that. Now, if we just reinvent the way that we do infrastructure as code, I'm not sure if that's really going to change the way that we work. So what I'm asking is, how do I bring that together now? Johannes changing, I don't know, an icon in your application that is hosted in one of these pieces of infrastructure as code. How do we bring that piece together and make a story?
I understand what you're asking. I'm so sorry. So basically, the way that the task definition would actually work today, that task definition would usually use like an image within the environment. So like there can be a number of ways we can do it. We don't do this fantastically in this example here because we're just using stable, and every time stable goes, it actually reruns like the application to be able to do it. But what we're trying to be able to do right now is to be able to run a function that will get the latest container version or the latest application version, and then it will show you that there is a diff that has to happen, and that diff will roll it into production. So that's like the most important. So inside, I'm in head here. I don't want to change my production environment at this moment in time. Let's not bring production down.
So what you're saying is at the end that we still need a CI process that sits around this, right? Because we need to get that, in this example, we need to get that container version or that application version. We need to make that available so it can then be consumed by the infrastructure as code or by a Systeminit as a reference, right?
There's two ways that you could do this, right? One, yes, if you have a traditional CI/CD pipe that you already have that generates assets out the end of it, Absolutely. You can do that. You can just pump those like version numbers into a function and that function will actually do it. But in other ways, like if you're building containers, you can have Systeminitiative build your container for you. Like just points to a source on disk. That source on disk would just generate a new asset, that new function, and it would actually go and deploy it. And of course, if you clicked on it in terms of a change set, you can build, see what the difference in the asset would be in the SBOM, and you could actually push that into the production environment when you merge the change set. So there's like a number of different ways that we could actually do it. For us at this moment in time, we had a traditional sort of CI/CD pipeline because this was being built for a while. So we just sort of kept it in that vein. But we have already been talking to other people who are like, we don't want this to be a CI/CD pipeline. Look, what you're telling us is that it's going to change how things work. We don't want to bring two tools together. Why can't we just do it within the same tool? So it's kind of exactly what you've just asked the question.
Yep. And I think that's something that I would then want to understand closer as well, because at the end we would want to integrate then the CI process in kind of the same tooling and empower developers to use that as well to build up their CI process or CI components going forward.
Yes. So we're trying to make this that it's the tool that allows you to be able to go as deep or as like the surface as you want. And the idea is because it's running functions and we have create functions, refresh functions, and delete functions, that the idea for us is that we're actually going to build discovery functions as well, because the refresh function is a describe against an API using a specific ID. So we could easily omit the ID, give me all of the VPCs in your AWS account, tell me what have you got locally and what is new, and then give me a list of what bring it. You could sync it from the real world back into your ecosystem as well, so that you can actually have, if you wanted to, if teams really wanted to use infrastructure as code, you could have architects or you could have CISOs or CTOs that would use like a view of Systeminitiative and be able to see all of the changes happen in their ecosystem to be able to validate that architectures are correct and that what the development teams or the infrastructure teams themselves are doing sort of fits into the larger plan.
Okay. That means that with Systeminitiative, we kind of have an answer to the CD part already, right? Because now the CD part would be, I take the change set and I apply that change set to main. That's the actual CD process. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And do we already have stupid things like approvals, group approvals?
We do.
Validations, that kind of stuff?
We absolutely do. And I'm going to see if I can log in to Systeminitiative on another account so you can actually see what happens when I'm in here. Yeah, I'm in. Right.
Can I do also validations and stuff like that? Like, can I ask security validations automatically? Or would that be a function that would be applied to an asset?
It would be, yes. So what would actually happen there is that you would be able to understand, you can actually see me dragging me in another window.
Yes.
That is me signed in with another account. And because we're in this change set, if I hit the apply change set button, then look, it's like a different type of poll has clicked the apply. Are you ready? Are you approving? Are you rejecting? But because on this screen on the right, I own the change set, it's like I ignore the vote and I can apply it. But everyone else actually has to wait and vote and pass and reject. So we're building that at this moment in time.
Okay, yeah, that's exciting. And then I can also put that on group level and notifications and these kind of things.
We actually want to be able to bring it down into individual areas. So for example, we would love to be able to select all the database components on the graph and make the person or the people that are like have to approve changes to be that, the DBA team. Or the networking team would have to do for the VPC and the networking side. We're trying to be able to give that fine-grained level of control. We're trying to think that through at this moment in time.
Cool, thanks. This looks good. How would then the validation piece look like if I have validations to go through a certain environment?
So,
can we have a look on that?
Yeah, so for us at this moment in time, you can write any qualification that you need to, right? So I'm trying to let's put a Docker image, right? So this is one of like the most sort of useful functions that we can write in Docker. So like check not public And what I can do is I can attach a qualification that basically says, if component.domain.image, I think it's image, we get full autocomplete in here. Yeah. Dot starts with,
and it's TypeScript language?
It is TypeScript. Okay. Yeah. What we can actually do is we can say, let's make that a failure. And you can imagine you can write your own, like whatever way you want to do that. Component not able to use public registry images. And I can go and I can create a Docker image on the graph. And I can just point that Docker image to the Nginx. And a qualification should run. And it basically says, wait. Come on.
Maybe you need to have the full image, yeah. I guess.
I think my URL is not right. I'll just take, like, if it starts with Nginx.
Yeah, but it did not find the image.
No, it's there. It's there. Like,
okay.
it find it. Okay. It's able to see that it's there. But, like, we can see now that, like, you can say, look, component is not able to use public registry images. Here you can do things like you can't create instances of X size. You can't create, like, policies of whatever you want. You can have full fine-grained control to be able to, like, cool. Add these qualifications that stop you from doing stuff.
Cool. Yeah, this looks good. I think there's some more stuff to do, right? Get
absolutely.
Into that regards. But I think this was a very good overview into what to expect from this.
Yeah, and for us, it's like we're just scratching the surface, right? Like, we're playing 15 years of catch up on how people have done stuff. Like, so, you know, it's always going to be a moving target, but we feel that we're doing things in a very fun, very new way, and it's going to be a lot of fun to use. It was a lot of fun to build our own infrastructure using this tool together. So
yeah. So what's your call to action for people listening to this recording and now wanting to dive into Systeminit? What would you recommend them to do, and what would you hope to get out of the audience?
So there's a couple of ways. One, like, follow the project, try it out, give some feedback, open issues, open feature requests. Like, those types of things are solid gold for us because that's real life use cases. But the second one is, like, we are trying to build a community on Discord, which we can link in the show notes as well, where you can go and you can hang out, you can ask questions, you can, like, use it as a place to talk about what you do in your DevOps journey and your DevOps experience, because again, that's bringing all these people together to foster a better environment.
Cool. Okay. And anything, so for first starters, what should they do to try this out? What is the easiest approach?
There is a local environment. So when you check it out, there is some instructions where you can run a command and it will spin it up locally just using some Docker containers. And you can actually take it all for a test drive in your local machine.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Johannes, thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
It was real fun. And I will also put, I think, your LinkedIn in, right? So if people want to reach out to you, then LinkedIn might be the best choice for now. Paul, thank you so much. And I hope that I can invite you back in a year or so when everything has been developed a little bit further, right? And then we see how this is going to look in production.
Yeah, awesome.
Bye-bye.